When we talk about land, we're not just talking about the ground under our feet, are we? Nope. We're talking about security, we're talking about family, about a legacy. But a piece of land is also, well, it's a stack of paper, and understanding what's on that paper is the key to knowing your rights. So, let's dive into this, because it's a complex but absolutely crucial topic.
It seems like such a simple question, doesn't it? Do you own your land? But honestly, in Sri Lanka, the answer can be surprisingly complicated. The type of document you're holding, the history of that plot, it all feeds into what the real answer is. So, to get to the bottom of this, we have to start with the single most important distinction in Sri Lankan land law. I mean, everything comes down to this. Every single piece of land falls into one of two major categories, and the rules that govern them, they are completely different.
Okay, so think of these two categories as operating in totally separate worlds. State land, it's kind of like a library book. The state owns it, and you get permission to use it, right? But you can't just go and sell it to someone else. Private land, on the other hand, that's like a book you bought from a store. It is yours. You can read it, you can lend it, you can sell it, whatever you want. The key takeaway here is that ownership is it's a fundamentally different concept in each world.
All right, let's explore that first world a little deeper, state land. How does the government actually hand over land to its citizens? Well, there's a formal process for it, and it's called alienation.
There are basically three main ways this happens. For a lot of people, the journey starts with something called a permit. That can later evolve into a grant. And then, in some pretty special cases, land can be given out directly by the president, usually for a specific purpose, like for a school or a charity.
So for many, this is where it all begins, with a permit. This piece of paper allows a person, often from a low-income family, to live on and cultivate a piece of state land. But, and this is a big but, it is not full ownership. It's conditional. It's a right to use the land, not a right to sell it.
The next step up is a huge one. After you meet certain conditions, like you've developed the land and lived there for a number of years, that permit can be converted into a grant. Now, this is a much more secure document. It's way closer to what we think of as true ownership, and it gives the holder a much more permanent and powerful claim to the land.
But even with a grant, state land comes with some really important rules. Think of it as the fine print. You can't just claim the land by occupying it for a long time. That's a legal concept called prescription, and it just doesn't apply here. You can't sell it freely, and any transfer, like if you wanted to nominate your child to inherit it, needs official written approval. Those are the strings attached.
Okay, now let's switch gears and cross over into that other world, private land. Over here, the rules change completely. Ownership revolves around one central document, the deed.
And hey, remember that rule, prescription, that I said doesn't apply to state land? Well, here, in the world of private land, it is a huge deal. If you possess a piece of private land that belongs to somebody else and you do it openly, without being challenged, for 10 straight years, you can legally claim ownership of it. It's a fascinating and pretty powerful legal principle.
For private land, everything, and I mean everything, comes down to this. The deed is the legal instrument. It's the paper that proves who the owner is and how they got the land. It is the absolute foundation of your rights.
The most common type is the deed of transfer. This is what you get when you buy a property. Simple as that. It's the official legal record of the sale, signed by both the seller and the buyer, and it's all witnessed and certified by a notary.
Then you've got the deed of gift, and just like the name says, this is what you use when land is given away, not sold. It's super common for passing down property within a family, like from a parent to a child.
So how do you make that prescription claim official? Well, that's where this comes in, the deed of declaration. This one isn't about transferring land from person A to person B. It's about you formally stating, this land is mine, after you've met that 10-year requirement we talked about.
So, you've got your deed, you own your private land, you feel totally secure, but are you? This leads us to one of the most pressing questions in all of land rights.
The short answer is yes, but, and this is a very, very important but, it can only happen under a strict legal framework and for a stated public purpose, like building a new highway or a reservoir.
The government can't just show up and take your property. No way. The Land Acquisition Act lays out a really clear process. A notice has to be issued in all 3 languages. You have the right to object in writing, and a formal inquiry has to be held.
And this right here, this is the most critical part of that whole process. If the state acquires your private land for a public purpose, they must compensate you. And that compensation is legally required to be based on the fair market value of your property at that time.
So we've covered state land, we've covered private land, and even how the state can acquire it. So what does all of this mean in practical terms? How does this actually help you?
You know that old saying, good fences make good neighbors? It's true. But in land law, something else is even better: a good survey. Boundary disputes are incredibly common, but you know what? They're also preventable. A proper, official survey plan is your first line of defense.
And look, if you ever face the absolute worst-case scenario, being asked to leave your land, this right here is your emergency checklist. 1. Get everything in writing. 2. Have your documents ready. 3. Never ever sign anything you don't fully understand. 4. Always get a copy. And 5. Most importantly, get legal help immediately. Knowing these steps can make all the difference in the world.
When you really think about it, whether it's a permit, a grant, or a deed, your right to your land is told through a paper trail. Understanding that story, knowing what those documents really mean, that isn't just about legal knowledge. It's about protecting your home, your investment, and your future.